Hey everybody, Wayne here. In today's overview and review, I am taking a look at A Most Fearful Sacrifice, The 3 Days of Gettysburg, designed by Hermann Luttmann and published by Flying Pig Games. Thank you to Hermann Luttmann for sending me a copy to review. A Most Fearful Sacrifice is a hex encounter wargame that simulates those 3 days in Pennsylvania that had such a huge impact on the American Civil War and American history. With A Most Fearful Sacrifice, you can play one of a dozen scenarios, from small affairs with just a handful of counters on each side, all the way up to the entire grand battle. The game comes with 2 large maps, larger even than a standard 22-inch by 34-inch wargame map. However, many of the scenarios require less space to play. I have a map set up right here, but this is not the complete map. It's actually folded up still, so there is more space to this map. So like I said, it is a large game when you have the complete thing set up. A Most Fearful Sacrifice uses a modified system of the blind sword system, called Black Swan. It is designed to be simpler, allowing the system to handle larger scale battles than blind swords, while still keeping the accurate simulation aspects featured in the previous system. It relies on card draws rather than chit draws, and simplification of the combat system compared to blind swords. Let's do a quick overview. I do have a full tutorial video and a full playthrough video of the first scenario for an in-depth look at the game. I'll cover my pros and cons, and then I'll wrap up with my final thoughts. As I mentioned at the beginning, and of course you can see, this is a hex encounter game, driven by card draw. The blind swords was driven by chit draw, this is driven by card draw. So what you'll do at the beginning, you'll set up a scenario or the complete battle. It'll tell you exactly which hexes are going to be part of it. And again, many of them will be smaller areas of one map or both, as opposed to just everything at once. You'll set that up. You'll have perhaps victory point hexes that you have counters to place on there. And you're using units that are fairly standard in the hex encounter wargame world. Take a quick look at them here up close just so you guys can see. We have a Union unit here on the left that is an artillery. He has 6 combat strength or strength points with this game. Law's unit here, he has 3 strength points. They both have 4 cohesion rating, the number in red. The R next to the 6 for the artillery shows that it's rifled artillery. For the infantry, and this is a simplification from blind sword system, it doesn't matter what kind of weapon, it doesn't keep track of what kind of weapon, you just look at their strength points and then their cohesion rating. In the top right, you will have what division that unit is part of, and then in the middle will be the brigade it's part of. And then in the left is the corps. So this is one of Law's brigade units, part of Hood's division, and then part of 1st Corps for the Confederates. Blue for Union, butternut for Confederates. Now, how the game works is, according to the scenario instructions, you'll set up a deck of cards. This draw deck will have event cards, activation cards that you will be drawing, and then deciding what you're going to do each turn. Now, when it comes to the activations in this game, again, unlike blind swords, that's where I'm kind of differentiating between the two, is that you're using these cards that are on these command displays, and I have some out right here. And so, for example, if you're drawing for the Confederates, and you have a core activation card, and it's in the draw deck, and you go ahead and draw. Now, all the cards are in one deck, by the way. I didn't mean draw for the Confederates, like they have separate decks. It's all one deck you draw from. But say you draw Longstreet's core activation card. You're going to roll on here, and it's going to tell you, you can see things like Division Priority Number 1, Division Priority 1 and 2, Alexander and Eshelman artillery. Like, what does that mean? Very simple. You're rolling on that to determine what division priorities and what artillery you may be able to activate. You then check your command display. So remember, it has Division Priority 1, Division Priority 1 and 2. Look at your command display. You have it set up, and this is where you do at the beginning of your turn, is you are putting your division activation cards in one of the division priority slots of your choice. So you get to prioritize at the beginning of the turn which division you expect or hope to activate. And then once you do that, you may be rolling on their card to determine, okay, is it one brigade from that division? Is it going to be the entire division group? Is it every brigade activates with a different order, etc.? And you do that, and different leaders are rated good, poor, etc. So you never know exactly what you're going to be able to do each turn. It just depends on what you set up and you're hoping for, but then what you roll. So after you have your deck set up and you're drawing from it, right, you're activating units, and you have the different cards. And again, you have event cards, just like it was in Blind Swords. You're going to have the events that are going to tell you, hey, you know, it explains what the name of it is. It's going to say whether it's hold or play immediately. It's going to give information. And then here in this game, you have your default event. So if you have the event card and you can't play it for what it is, and you're holding it and you can't play it now, or if it says play immediately and you can't play it for what the event is, you can use it for a default event, which is any one unit may minimum move or issue a fire combat. So your events are always going to have some use to you, generally speaking. All right, so you've gone through all the activations, you've created your deck, you've drawn, you're activating formations. What do? You've activated your formations of units. And again, as I pointed out, right, they have the division in the top right, they have the brigade in the middle name, so you know where they're associated with. You're then going to assign an order to each active brigade or division. Artillery have separate rules. When they're activated, they can either move or conduct fire combat. For your infantry, or those other units, right? So cavalry as well, you will have a order step. You can give an attack, defend, or maneuver order. From that, you can either conduct, and this is the order it would go in: fire combat, which some of the orders you can't, such as maneuver; movement step, which all of them you can conduct some amount of movement; and then assault combat step, which you can only do with an attack order. So and then the different orders also have different levels of movement, right? You have different movement points. It's not printed on the counter because it depends on the order they get. So what the game is you're creating that draw deck, you're drawing from it, you're then activating units, right? Whatever pops up, and whether it's, you know, activating a full division, activating just a brigade, some artillery, etc. You're giving them orders, you're moving, conducting attacks, and generally seizing victory point locations from each other. That is the core of the game. You know, you'll run through a certain number of turns. You know, they're hour-long turns. Again, it's 3 full days for the whole entire thing. Most of the scenarios are going to be shorter than that. You'll kind of run through different segments of the battle. So you get to see the slaughter pen, you know what I mean? You'll get to see Pickett's charge. Like, you can experience different areas, different parts of the battle itself. And finally, last thing I want to talk about is the combat. So how the combat works is that when you're conducting fire combat, you know, like most games, right, you're going to check, say, your strength points, add them up, and what you're doing is you're actually rolling 3 dice. And again, veterans of Blind Swords will be very familiar with this, so if you are a Blind Swords fan, you can skip this. But if you're new to the series and new to these games, you'll want to know this. You roll all 3 dice at once, and it's a fairly unique system. And what it is first you're checking the black and white die, and you'll check them first, and it may be something like 3-1. Now, that's not 4, that's 31. You know, 6-2 would be 62, etc. You're checking on the combat results table on that column for whatever the strength points you had. Keeping in mind there are things like column shift modifiers for terrain, special events, etc. Once you're checking down a column, you're going to get a certain letter. That's going to be for the cohesion test. Then you're checking the red die. Whatever you rolled on here is going to be combined with the cohesion rating number on the defender's die, or excuse me, the defender's counter. So for instance, this law unit, remember the red is 4, that's his cohesion rating. So the 4 plus whatever you rolled with the red die will then give you your cohesion number. You're going to check that on the fire combat cohesion test and then go ahead and take the result. Things like shaken markers being flipped over, being depleted, flipped over to your battle worn side, right? So the reduced side, which has a little marker in the corner to tell you. Skedaddling, which is the term they use for retreat in this game. In addition, assault combat. Assault combat, similar, a little different though. There's no red die involved. Instead, you figure strength points, you go ahead but you do that for both the attacker and the defender. Column shifts, etc. You check where they are. You then, each side rolls these 2 dice, black and white, figures whatever result you get. So again, you know, 15, 35. Are you getting an E result, easy? Are you getting a T for tough, etc.? There's a variety of them. Go ahead and show you guys quick. So whatever then result you get, you're then going to check the assault combat's matrix. You're going to check for the attacker's one up here. You're going to check for the defender over here, whatever result they got. Because remember, they're also rolling the dice, not the red one. They're also rolling these dice. You will then go ahead and figure out, okay, if say it was a T and an R, T and R meet right here. Defender, skedaddle 1, so the defender will be retreating 1. All right, I know it's a very quick and dirty explanation of the game, the overview. There's a lot to the game. That's why I have a full tutorial video and I have a playthrough of a scenario for you guys to check out. Okay, I think we can call it there for the overview. Let's go to the pros and cons. All right, as usual, we'll start with my cons and end with my pros. First one, the fonts on the player cards, they're too small. Take a look at this. It's like a size 5 font. You know, it's really difficult to see. If I hold it up really close, you can see it, sure, but that's, you don't generally hold, you know, paper when you're reading it 2 inches from your face. So looking down at it here, very, very hard to read. I mean, I think from up there, you guys could probably read the text on the cards, right? That's a sort of call that a normal font. From here, can you read these player aid cards? Probably not. I wish they had printed them at 11 by 17 instead of 7 by 11, you know, the standard size of paper. Second, I occasionally stumbled with the assault combat system. Not that it was complicated or unclear, just the need to figure, you know, the strength points and then the column shifts. Then you're rolling, you know, the black and white dice, and then having to do that again, right? So you're doing it for both sides, both the attacker and the defender. It does feel like it bogs the game down a bit, at least when you're playing solitaire, right? Because as solitaire, you have to figure out both yourself. I know Hermann Luttmann was going for a simpler, faster system, and that's the only reason why I bring it up, because it does stand out to me as a small speed bump towards that goal. All right, that's it for the cons. Let's check the pros. First off, the game is gorgeous. You know, the late Rick Barber, the artist for the map, he presents us with a truly fitting memorial to his memory in the form of this map. I consider it his crowning achievement. You know, the colors, the elevation, the terrain features, you know, from the Devil's Den to the town of Gettysburg itself. The entire thing just looks amazing. You know, it's a masterpiece of a map. Not everyone's going to love this style, and I know because it's very similar, right, style to the previous American Civil War games, but simply put, my review, my opinion, I absolutely love it. The counter artwork is also tremendously well done. Kudos to Jose Fora. There's so much detail on them, yet thanks to the large size of them, you can actually see all that detail while keeping the counters and the numbers on them very usable. The game cards themselves, they're simple, but clear, attractive, and you're able to use them in the game without a single problem. Second, the components. They're the highest quality in wargaming, right? It's the highest quality you're going to get. Big, thick mounted map, large individually die-cut counters, linen finished cards. You couldn't ask for a higher quality production, which honestly is what we expect at this point from playing big games, but to see it with a game of this size and scope is quite an achievement. Third, the rulebook. It's clear, well written. It both teaches the game and acts as an excellent reference book. There's a short table of contents in the front, but even more importantly, a comprehensive index in the back. That index here is invaluable while I was learning the game and looking up any rules questions during play. You know, the rulebook, it's colorful, figuratively and literally, with pictures, examples of play, and designer notes sprinkled all throughout. Just amazing job with the rulebook. You guys know how I feel about rulebooks. This is what every rulebook should be. The Black Swan system, it shines. You know, how to describe how well it works with words? Well, if you want to see it in action, like I mentioned before, I have a full playthrough video of the first scenario. The only slow part about it is is setting up the first initial scenarios and then setting up the draw deck. And even then, it's not really slow. It's just, it's part of it's more procedural. But once that's done, you've picked your events, you've figured out what you need to do, and you go ahead and you start shuffling, the action starts. You're drawing a card, you're choosing an action from that card, or rolling dice, choosing a different action based on what you're rolling. Maybe you roll again, you draw again, etc. You're moving units, you're engaging in combat, you're maneuvering them, you're trying to achieve whatever goals you have. Seize those heights, take little round top, take big round top, etc. This continues, back and forth, and even playing solitaire until before you know it, you played out an entire turn. With the core and division activation system, you very quickly and efficiently are able to determine what formations will be able to activate. From there, you can begin to make decisions on what order or orders to give those activated formations. Should they press the enemy with an attack? Should they go on the defensive, which still allows them to conduct fire combat, but limits their movement while still allowing them to rally? Or should they sacrifice combat ability for speed that turn and conduct a maneuver order? You have a variety of options on what you want to do every turn. Another thing that is gladly retained from Blind Swords is how strength and morale are handled and integrated into combat. The system of having, two different roles. One based on a unit's strength points, which simulates, X number of men and their weapon types, and another based on their cohesion rating, which simulates morale and unit discipline, has been and remains a fantastic system for simulating mid-19th century armies. And since you roll all three at once you're used to the column shift modifiers, combat plays out fairly quickly. One roll, two different combat mechanics are resolved. Finally, like its predecessor system, Blind Swords, Black Swan walks that fine line between too much randomness and chaos and too much detail and simulation. And just like Blind Swords, it succeeds. There is dice rolling, a lot of it, but you are the one who sorts your division activation cards by priority. You're the one who chooses what orders to assign your activated formations, and you are the commander who carries them out. Is there luck involved? Of course. But you can stack the deck in your favor, kind of literally if you consider the fact you get to pick key events. You get to pick some of the events. There's random ones and there's ones you get to pick. But, you're working on that deck, setting it up right. You're setting up your division priorities. And then when you're moving, you're acting, you move that supporting brigade up to help with combat, help with assault combat. You make sure those odds support your attacks before you even make them. All right, that's it for my pros and cons. Let's dive into my final thoughts. All right, everyone. A Most Fearful Sacrifice is, in my opinion, the definitive Gettysburg game on the market today. If you love the history of the American Civil War, if you love the Battle of Gettysburg and the history of that fateful battle, you need to pick up this game. It's simple enough to learn in a day, but with enough chrome and complexity, not to mention size, scope, and number of scenarios, to offer a tremendous amount of replayability. A Most Fearful Sacrifice does what the Devils to Pay couldn't. It creates a simpler, yet still detailed, brother system to Blind Swords. Let's be clear, it doesn't replace the Blind Sword system. That is still the go-to system for chrome and detail. However, these two, Blind Swords and Black Swan, will be able to coexist side by side and allow Hermann Luttmann and other designers to create games covering every single battle, big or small, of the American Civil War. Don't be overwhelmed by the size and scope of this game. Pick up a copy, set up the first scenario, the Slaughter Pen, which only uses a part of a single map and less than a dozen counters, and get to learning. You can thank me later. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you think of my video and of this game. Have you played it yet? You're looking to pick it up now? What are your thoughts? Comment below. And if you haven't yet, you've made it this far, please like the video, subscribe. I really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, later.